I'm Tom Costello. I am in for Hallie Jackson with a breaking news special report. Donald Trump on trial, and perhaps the biggest bombshell day of testimony yet. The dramatic moments as the woman who had a front row seat to everything that this trial is about breaks down on tears on the stand. This woman, Hope Hicks, an aide who the former president really treated like a daughter. She led Trump's campaign communications when the alleged scheme took place to bury embarrassing stories. That was before he brought her to the White House for some of its top roles. But now, she hasn't spoken to Trump in 2 years. Today, prosecutors wanted to know what happened behind the scenes when this moment made headlines. The infamous Access Hollywood tape. Then candidate Trump caught on camera making vulgar comments about assaulting women. Hicks, who was Trump's press secretary at the time, says she did not know about the tape until she heard from a reporter, and that there was, in fact, a consensus at the time that, quote, this was going to be a crisis. The big question, why does that matter for this case now? We're going to hit the rewind button really quickly to go through that. Hicks says she called Michael Cohen, Trump's former fixer at the time, to ask if there was another tape that would need damage control. That happened in early October 2016. Later that month, prosecutors say damage control kicked in with the alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, who claims she had an affair with Trump. He denies it. And that this is the reason that we're here right now, why the former president faces 34 counts of falsifying business records, to which he has pleaded, of course, not guilty. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to take you inside all the rooms the cameras could not be in today. So if you weren't glued to every word, every note coming out of court, or if you had other things to do, don't worry about it. We've been on it, and we've got the details. Our team of reporters, of legal and political experts, is ready to break it all down, everything you'd like to know in this special report to look inside and behind the scenes at the Trump trial. We're starting with NBC's Yasmin Vasugian, who is live outside the courthouse in Manhattan. And Yasmin, Hope Hicks' testimony is really big for the prosecution, right? Because they want her to create a direct line from everything that happened in this campaign to, in their words, a criminal conspiracy to influence the election in 2016. Did that happen today?
Their objective was to create intent. Their objective was to create motive. That was the objective of the prosecution in the lead up of their testimony with Hope Hicks. And they built that timeline, Tom Costello. I don't know necessarily if I can answer whether or not they have that direct. It created the direct line. That's really up to the jury to decide. But they built this picture, this idea of an individual, of a man who was running for president of the United States in 2016. The revelations of this Access Hollywood tape in early October, in which Hope Hicks received the email from a reporter saying, there is this Access Hollywood tape out there. Do you have statements that you want to release pertaining to this Access Hollywood tape? She ran up to Trump Tower, in which they were preparing for the debate just a couple of days later. And she talked to the team about the revelations of this Access Hollywood tape, the contents of this Access Hollywood tape, the veracity of this Access Hollywood tape. And it went on from there, Tom, I would say, from there to the end of October, in which the payouts were made to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, painting this picture of a man running for election for president of the United States, desperate to keep these details, these sordid details, quiet, not sure if they were going to affect the outcome of the election, Tom.
Yeah, are we yet getting that key element, that direct connection to Mr. Trump's involvement in this alleged hush money scheme? Because she did not have a lot of positive things to say about Michael Cohen.
She didn't. Let me read some of the back and forth for you, if I can, Tom. Specifically, she said, I didn't know Michael to be an especially charitable person. He is the kind of person who takes credit. Trump thought it was generous of him to do, and he appreciated the loyalty. Michael felt like it was his job to protect him. This was in regards to the payoff after the revelation in a New York Times article in 2018 about the payoff to Stormy Daniels. This is how Hope Hicks saw Michael Cohen. And then in cross-examination, it got even better when it came to Michael Cohen, saying, asked, was Mr. Cohen part of the campaign? She said no. He would try to insert himself at certain moments, but he wasn't supposed to be on the campaign in any official capacity. There were things he did in a voluntary capacity because of his interest. And then this moment, Tom, which really drove things home, I believe, for the defense, by the way, where she said he liked to call himself a fixer or Mr. Fix-It. It was only because he first broke it. I would say, Tom, one of the biggest takeaways I had from Hope Hicks's testimony was that she was credible for both sides, both for the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution painting this woman who was loyal to Donald Trump, but also knew of the interworkings of the Trump campaign. With the defense, she served as someone painting the former president as a family man who was worried about embarrassing his family and his wife, Melania.
And also, we mentioned that Hicks became emotional on the stand. And remember, Hicks and Trump haven't spoken for years. What did our NBC colleagues in the courtroom see in terms of the dynamics, the interplay, if there was any, the look between Trump and Hicks?
At the beginning of cross-examination, actually, Hicks got fairly emotional. They took a momentary break to allow her to gather herself, and then she retook the stand for cross-examination. My takeaway from that moment was, considering kind of the history that she has with the former president, let's not forget, at 25 years of age, she took a job back in 2014 with the Trump Organization. Just 2 years later, she was a top advisor to the former president, incredibly loyal, not only to the former president, along with his family as well. In 2022, that relationship soured because of her testimony on about January 6th and the events leading up to January 6th as well. So certainly there were some interactions, although the former president was watching more Hope Hicks's testimony directly through the monitors versus making eye contact with her directly, despite their close relationship, Tom, for so many years.
Interesting. Yasmin, thank you very much. Yasmin Vasugian, who is on the site right there in Manhattan. Let's go now to NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos and Georgetown constitutional law professor Michelle Goodwin. Danny, let's talk about some of that emotion. How might a jury react to that emotion from Hicks, and did it appear sincere?
Oh, I think it appeared very sincere, and Hope Hicks didn't need a lot of help on the credibility meter. But of course, that show of emotion, and jurors are very good at telling whether or not something is sincere or not. In fact, the entire jury system is premised on the idea that we're all hardwired with this sort of truth and lie detector ability. And so that is really what the jury system is. It's people assessing credibility of other regular folks and deciding who to believe and who not to believe. So emotion on the stand can go one of two ways, or actually can go several ways. I mean, it can be credible in some contexts and completely incredible in other contexts. But when you look at the total picture of Hope Hicks' testimony, on the whole, I think a show of emotion probably came across as very genuine to this jury based on the fact that she really didn't have any credibility issues like some of the other prosecution witnesses.
Let's go to Professor Goodwin. You've been reading the notes all day as well. None of us is in the courtroom. We're reading the notes back and forth. Does it appear to you that the prosecution did a good job of connecting the dots from the Access Hollywood tape all the way through to the time in the White House?
Well, they did what they needed to do, and the fact that Hope Hicks appeared credible for both sides is actually could be argued to be something that is successful for the prosecution. Much of the backdrop of this are some people saying that this is politically motivated, what's taking place. And it's important to remind people that these are 34 felony counts. These are felony counts associated with the former president doing business in New York. So it's not related to January 6th. It's not that kind of political hysteria that has been framed, but rather he is a businessman in New York. He must comply with the business laws of New York. That is what this stems from. So this hush money trial itself, hush money could be something that's a misdemeanor offense. Why this has been elevated to felony counts is because the allegation from the prosecutors is that there was an attempt to conceal something more.
Hicks seemed to suggest that, yes, in fact,
that's right.
That they were very much front and center thinking about the election.
That's exactly right. in October with this salacious video reveal of hearing the former president before he's elected, before the election, explaining how he grabs women, about how he violates with women, how he has no consideration of this, and that he does it all the time. The fear that there could be more allegations such as that coming out. And let's be clear, this is a former president who has already been found guilty of having sexually violated someone and many other allegations over time. So right to be concerned.
Okay, let's quickly go back to Danny. And Danny, there's these competing images of the former president playing out right here, right? We have one that he would like to push, that he's just a guy who signs the checks. And there's also the one that Hope Hicks describes of Trump, who is intimately involved in every aspect of his business and life. What picture is coming off as more compelling right now, or more dominant?
I talked about this earlier. There are really only two avenues here. There's either Trump as the boss of a large corporation that requires minions who act independently, and they hand him checks and he signs them. That's going to be the defense's view of the world. And then the prosecution's view, which is that Donald Trump, in this closely held family company, was a micromanager, and he was on top of everything. And so really, only one of two choices are available to the jury, and so far the people have put in plenty of evidence, and some of it is kind of snuck in, but the idea that Hope Hicks conveyed was that Donald Trump was somebody who was intimately involved in all aspects of the business. That's going to help the prosecution make their case that once they've proven the transaction from Cohen to Daniels, that it's something that Donald Trump not only would have known about, but would have had to approve, not tacitly, but directly approve this payment. So really, it's hard to say which way it's going, but only one of two is true.
Michelle, the defense really played hard on this idea that Cohen describes himself as Mr. Fix-It. Does that help the defense? Does it hurt the prosecution?
Well, what they're trying to do is frame Michael Cohen as someone who has poor character, someone who can't be trusted. This is something that Donald Trump has said in social media, using the term liar to describe Michael Cohen, and that's what they want to leave the jury with, is that someone who exceeded what the boundaries were of what he was called to do, not supposed to be involved in the presidential campaign at all, so anything that he did was pretty much on his own without any kind of guidance or any way implicating Donald Trump.
The idea was he was rogue.
Yeah, that's the idea that they are trying to paint. Whether that's successful before this jury remains to be seen.
Thank you, Professor Goodwin, and thank you, Danny Savalos. Both great interpretations and analysis. As we mentioned, Hope Hicks played a key communications role at Mr. Trump's company in his campaign and the White House, and her testimony today was all about how they got that message out to the public. For more on that, let's bring in Washington Post media critic Eric Wemple. Eric, at one point, Hicks was asked about her press duties during the 2016 campaign, asking if there was, what about the team around her? And she said it was, quote, just me and Mr. Trump. And, quote, we were all just following his lead, she said. She was right out of college, a lot of responsibility for somebody that age. Does that suggest that Trump had really an intense control of the messaging with Hicks at his right hand?
Well, that's correct. I think on that point, I think history bears out exactly what she was saying. At the time, it was very clear that the Trump campaign, or I should say the Trump campaign, wasn't really much in terms of like your traditional campaign. It was very skeletal. There wasn't much. And it was mainly a communications operation. I mean, she would pass along, questions to Trump, and they get on the phone, and Trump would just basically riff off the top of his head. And those quotes and so on and so forth, many of them outrageous, almost all of them lies, would go straight into in the papers and onto the air. And all of a sudden, reporters were scrambling, trying to figure out what was true and what wasn't. As I said, most of it was not. But yes, they were following his lead, in part because he just lied, and lied. And I think that even the people around him who chose to associate with him were not willing to go as far as he was. And I think the other thing here is that it was working. At least if you looked at the polls, Trump was beating his rivals in the polls. So it was a strategy that worked.
Micromanaging the messaging all day.
Absolutely. I mean, everything. And it was a media-driven campaign. I mean, he was getting all of his rallies covered by CNN, some on this network and Fox, too. I think most of the cable industry is taking a second look at that. But, you know, he was getting all this stuff covered, and it was just going straight into other media. It was a remarkable time, and nobody was prepared for it.
Yeah, but knowing all of that, what can we actually trust from Hope Hicks, someone who back in 2018 acknowledged that working for Mr. Trump occasionally required her to, quote, tell white lies, she said, as someone who observed how she interacted with the media and public on behalf of Mr. Trump? Can we trust what she says now?
Well, obviously she's under oath. One of the things you learn about like working for Donald Trump is sooner or later you're going to have to raise your right hand. And she was under oath when she said that in congressional testimony, and she gave an example like, oh, white lie would be when I would say Mr. Trump is unavailable when in fact he was available. But as we all know, the falsehoods and the lies coming from the Trump establishment were much more grievous, much more damaging than all that, and also much more creative. But I don't, you know, many of your people on air this afternoon have said that Hope Hicks managed to sort of winnow her way through all that without damaging her credibility too much. That is an assessment that I don't really disagree with. I think that of all the people in the Trump orbit, she managed to, but by seeking a low profile, she never was seeking the spotlight too much. She did manage not to get slimed with all of this stuff personally. She runs a strategic consulting operation now. I'm not sure exactly how it's doing, but I don't think, you know, I'm not a legal analyst, but as far as people in Trump's orbit, I would have to rank her among the higher people in terms of credibility. Granted, that's a very low bar, but, you know, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, Eric Wemple, thank you very much. Let's bring in now our political pros. Mark Short, the former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence, and Democratic strategist Amisha Cross. Mark, your time overlapped a little bit with Hope Hicks, right? As you are watching her testimony in court, does it appear she has any agenda or any axe to grind here?
I don't think so, Tom. I don't think she does have an axe to grind. I will tell you that when Vice President Pence was tapped to join the campaign in the summer of 2016, when we joined the campaign, it was really only Hope Hicks and Stephen Miller were the two staffers. I mean, there was...
That seems stunning to me.
It was stunning. It was a remarkable campaign because former President Trump really ran it himself. And so you had the carousel of various campaign managers going through. But the two stables were Stephen and Hope.
Amisha, we've talked a lot about, you know, the Biden campaign here is looking for any opportunity to potentially turn something here from this testimony into a campaign item for them, for the Biden campaign. Did you see anything so far that might work to the Biden campaign's advantage?
As of today, no. I think that Hope Hicks is somebody who has been a strategist with Donald Trump for quite some time. She was fresh out of college when she went to work for the Trump organization. A lot of her career has been based on loyalty to Donald Trump. And today, all that she honestly did was further, you know, throw mud on Michael Cohen, which we've already heard many people do. So I don't think that anything from thus far has been able to showcase itself as, oh, this is the smoking gun we can run with in ads or anything else.
Yeah, Cohen is not looking good coming out of this trial. Mark, can we go back? Can we go to 35,000 feet here? Because normally Trump has found that he can get a bit of a boost to his fundraising efforts, at least for his small base, his diehard base, when he goes through these various, you know, legal problems. However, he's pretty far behind the Biden campaign right now, right? Look at that. $90 million so far, presidential numbers in terms of how much they've raised, $155 million cash on hand. And Biden is quite a way, or rather, Trump is quite a bit behind that. Does he have any opportunity to make up ground here with a broader group of constituents in the middle, maybe, or is he really kind of isolated to his far right base?
I think he can make up ground. I think that there would be more and more Republicans who come back on board. But, Tom, I think it's important to remember in 2016, Hillary far outraised Trump, too. And as we just talked about, he runs a very small operation in the campaign, and he gets all the earned media he wants. And so there's a lot of focus on the money deficit.
He doesn't need the campaign ads. He's on TV every day.
And so the money deficit, I don't ever think is as big of a deal as I think some in the media make it out to be.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Hey, Amisha, also, this meeting is a big part because he's going down to Mar-a-Lago. I should make that point. He's going down to Mar-a-Lago, and that's a big part of his so-called Veep stakes, right, to replace Mark's old boss, Mike Pence. It almost sounds like he's trying to make this almost kind of like an episode of his former reality TV show. Here are some of the top contenders, we're told. Any one of those, would any of those be a Democrat's top choice? In other words, it would be better for the Dems if he picked one of them. And also, why do it this way? Is it all sort of creating a show and kind of creating the whole kind of, I don't know, the same kind of excitement that he had on his TV show?
Yeah, I think that he loves and he resonates with being able to make a show out of his VP candidate choice. We recognize that, you know, the polling is what it is. And again, I think this far out, we probably shouldn't pay as much attention to it as media does. However, Trump's base is not movable. They are going to be there regardless. And quite frankly, we know that voters vote for the top of the ticket, not the vice president. So he could choose any one of those people. And at the end of the day, his people are still going to be there. I think that for those swing voters and those individuals who he's trying to, who you would think that he would be trying to grab outside of his base voters, it's going to take a little bit more. We do recognize that he most recently said essentially that he was going to track women's pregnancies in a push to basically quell any abortion rights across this country. That's really frustrating. And I think that for women voters in particular, that is something that they will be looking at as we see voting as we see abortion rights restrictions continue to expand. And that's going to be something that I don't think anybody who was just listed is going to stand against. That's going to be something that hits him hard.
Mark, he has such a lock on his base, on that far-right portion of the Republican Party. Has that expanded at all? Do you see it expanding at all? I mean, the country's pretty well locked into who they like and don't like at this point, aren't they?
I think the country is very polarized and locked in. I think that there's something pollsters are coming more to call double haters. And that's the question. For the people who dislike both, who's going to be the one that they view as least unattractive? And I think that there will be some Republicans who continue to come back to Trump because you're looking at the chaos on campuses, concerned about inflation or the border, and that rallies them back to Trump. But I think that one of the differences as well from the VP stakes, to Misha's point, is that in 2016, he did need somebody to rally the party behind him. He was a blank slate. He doesn't need that now. And so the vice presidential pick is not as consequential as it was, I think, 8 years ago.
I think to your point, though, Amisha, people vote for who's the top of the ticket, right? And the vice presidential candidate is just kind of like an afterthought almost.
Yeah, it's a little bit of icing on the cake, but it's not going to make or break the ticket. And they think that for Trump, he's doing this at Mar-a-Lago and kind of auditioning people more so for fundraising purposes, because every day that he is in this trial, he's not able to be out there campaigning. And to a point that was made earlier, he's also getting a lot of free media attention. He doesn't have to worry about ads because they're covering him 24/7, even though he's not on the campaign trail. No lesson was learned from 2016.
It kind of feels like another episode of The Apprentice when we're going into the Mar-a-Lago VP stakes, right? Sweepstakes. Guys, thank you very much. Thanks for your expertise. A lot of other big headlines to tell you about today. We're going to catch you up on all of it on this very busy Friday when we pick up regular programming right after the break. Here we go. The news continues. Tonight, a bombshell indictment for a sitting congressman. The DOJ says he and his wife took hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes from foreign groups, the charges that could put him away for the rest of his life. In Texas, the state is bracing for more devastating flooding and possibly tornadoes just as they started to pick up the pieces. Our team is in the thick of it this evening. And the Pennsylvania man who had a ton of ammo in a bag in Turks and Caicos will find out his fate at the end of the month. He's facing 12 years, and the judge is not taking it was an accident for an answer. In tonight's original, a group of tech entrepreneurs wants to build a brand new city in a rural part of California from the ground up. Why some locals say they're being duped into going along with that plan. Good day, I'm Tom Costello. I am in for Hallie, and just in the last few hours, a House Democrat has been hit with serious federal bribery charges. Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas, as well as his wife, charged by the DOJ with accepting bribes from a company controlled by the government of Azerbaijan, as well as a Mexican bank. The end game, prosecutors say, influencing U.S. policy to benefit those countries and the bank. The indictment comes after a raid on Cuellar's home and campaign office back in 2022. You can see some of that footage right there. Cuellar was at one point the co-chair of the Congressional Azerbaijan Caucus. In a statement, he denies all wrongdoing, saying he still has plans to run for re-election in November. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries says Cuellar will take leave from one of his committee assignments, but he is not calling for the indicted congressman to step down. He becomes the second member of Congress in less than a year to face bribery charges. New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez set to go on trial later this year. NBC's Ken Delaney is following all of this for us. And Ken, what kind of picture now does this indictment paint of the congressman?
A shameful one, Tom. It essentially says he sold his office to do the bidding of a foreign government. And the charges include an array of the kind of crimes you typically see in a corruption case: bribery, mail fraud, and money laundering. But then it adds this wrinkle of acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign government. And it's because this indictment says that, as you said, he was doing the bidding of the government of Azerbaijan, pursuing their foreign policy in Washington, where they have a significant agenda. And the indictment says he and his wife accepted nearly $600,000 in bribes over a 10-year period, which seems like a lot of money, but actually isn't when you think that a congressman can retire and earn that much in 6 months as a lobbyist. Well, but what it says is that this money was laundered through sham contracts paid to shell companies owned by the congressman's wife. The indictment says the congressman's wife did little or no work, but the congressman agreed to take official action in exchange for this money. Now, Cuellar's lawyer says to NBC News that the Justice Department is making significant leaps here. They don't have the evidence to establish quid pro quo. And look, these corruption cases are not easy to make, so we'll have to wait and see exactly how this proceeds, Tom.
Hey, Ken, we're already seeing one stark difference here in that members of Congress aren't calling for Cuellar's resignation en masse. What does that say to you about comparing the Menendez case and the Cuellar case?
Right. So Cuellar is the second lawmaker in a year, Menendez being the first, to be accused of selling his office on behalf of a foreign government. In the Menendez case, Tom, the evidence was so stark, was so significant, and it was his second corruption case. Remember, he narrowly got off on the first one a few years ago. Gold bars and cash found in his home. That evidence was just so visceral that I think it led more people to say he needs to go. This case, I think people are saying, let's wait and see. They know that these corruption cases, it sounds really bad when you read the indictment, but they are difficult to make. The Justice Department has to show a quid pro quo here. They have to show evidence that the payments were made in exchange for official action, and Henry Cuellar is saying that didn't happen. So we'll wait and see.
Ken Delaney, thank you very much. We have more breaking news coming into us in just the last few minutes. A confirmed tornado touching down in Texas, meaning that the state is now hitting its 9th straight day of tornado activity. You can see some of that right there. Texas just can't catch a break from these twisters. Check out this near Hallie, a huge, massive cone at the very, very tip of that tornado, and they can't catch a break from other kinds of bad weather either, with the Houston area right now bracing for a long weekend of more intense flooding. Weather experts are warning locals that you should evacuate now if you can, or be ready to stay put for days. Millions of people in and around Houston are at the center of all of this, dealing with flood watches in effect right now. The evacuation order comes after that region took an absolute beating on Thursday with as much as 12 inches of rain coming down on some parts of Texas, causing rivers there to overflow with intense flooding. And that has led to scary scenes. Look at this. Folks pulled from their cars after flash floods came out of nowhere. NBC's Kathy Park is in Conroe, Texas, I should say. And Kathy, what are folks bracing for where you are right now tonight and into the weekend?
So, Tom, they are bracing for, unfortunately, more severe weather. And I can tell you the ground is already extremely saturated, so any more moisture, any more rainfall could make matters worse. What you're probably seeing behind me, I can tell you this isn't a lakefront home. It actually just happened overnight. This is a San Jacinto River, and we're told by the property owner that Yesterday, the water started rising sometime in the 9 o'clock hour, and she had to evacuate because the water was rising that quickly. This has covered her entire property. This is roughly 3 acres, and now it looks like a lake. She actually gave us a tour inside her home. We just saw the damage inside. The water came up about a foot, she said. A lot of the furniture is now just damp with the moisture, and there is just a huge cleanup ahead. So a lot of stories like that just all across the area. Homeowners just picking up the pieces, now cleaning up and bracing for more storms. But businesses are also suffering too. In fact, we spoke with the GM of a nursery not too far from here, and he said he lost hundreds of thousands of trees, plants, and shrubs. Take a listen.
Being as though they opened up the dam in the middle of the day, we just kind of had to watch our business float away in a sense.
Wow.
It's definitely tough, but you know we're gonna do everything it takes to get back into gear and be ready for our customers and our staff. You know, these guys, this is everybody's career, so we're going to take it super serious.
And Tom, we were told by that GM that really this is the busiest time of year for them, and they were bracing for just large crowds this weekend because they had a big promo going on. But now today they're spending the day cleaning up, trying to salvage what they can. Of course, they'll be keeping their eyes to the skies.
Yeah, you know, everybody remembers Hurricane Harvey, that storm that brought devastating floods to the Houston area back in 2017. I had friends who just were devastated by that. Any lessons learned that are helping to guide their operations right now?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up Harvey because a lot of folks we spoke with are drawing comparisons to Harvey because that was the last significant natural disaster, and a lot of folks are still recovering from that storm, believe it or not. In fact, the homeowner who lives right here, she said she just finished up repairs not too long ago, and now she's going to have to do it all over again a second time around 6 years later. Tom?
Okay, Kathy, thank you very much. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you may want to know about tonight. Number 1, demolition started today on that I-95 overpass in Norwalk, Connecticut. You may recall parts of the highway shut down yesterday after a fuel truck collided with 2 other cars and burst into flames. The state's governor says heat from that fire damaged the overpass, so crews have to tear down the bridge on the critical interstate. Demolition could take 24 hours or more to finish. The highway itself could be closed until Monday. Number 2, the Justice Department announcing today that a California man has been indicted by a federal grand jury in Atlanta for threatening Fulton County DA Fani Willis. According to the indictment, he posted multiple threatening comments on YouTube. The DOJ says he'll be arraigned next month. The FBI is investigating. Number 3, the U.S. economy added fewer jobs than expected last month, while the unemployment rate grew. Now listen, that could actually be good news because it means the economy is slowing, which could allow the Fed to consider cutting interest rates as soon as the fall. And the stock market likes that news. It rallied on that possibility. Number 4, basketball superstar Caitlin Clark is gearing up to make her first WNBA debut tonight. Her team, the Indiana Fever, will play the Dallas Wings for their preseason opener. Clark will make her regular season debut when the Fever play the Connecticut Sun in a couple of weeks. Number 5, San Francisco's famous Fisherman's Wharf now covered, look at that, covered with sea lions. More than 1,000 of them hanging out on the wharf just this week. That's the most the wharf has seen in the past 15 years. Why? The Pier's harbor master says the sea lions are chasing down a huge school of anchovies, one of those sea lions' favorite foods. You can also put it on a sea lion pizza. Coming up, the stunning new details in the race against time to find missing vacationers who mysteriously have disappeared in Mexico. Plus, the almost remake of Snakes on a Plane in Florida, only they're in a guy's pants. Stay with us. Okay, we're back. An American tourist waiting months to learn his fate must now wait a couple of weeks longer after he says he accidentally brought ammunition in his luggage to Turks and Caicos. 39-year-old Brian Hagerich appeared in court today for the first time since he was detained back in February. He was heading home with his family when he was arrested, and he faces up to 12 years in prison. The judge's decision is expected later this month and could have an impact for other Americans who are detained on the British territory for similar reasons. NBC's Sam Brock is joining us now. Sam, there were no cameras allowed in court, I understand. Walk us through what happened at this hearing today.
In some respects, Tom, it was kind of stunning because I think the expectation was, sure, there's a mandatory minimum of 12 years, but there's been previous cases where there were only fines, or in one case, an 8-month sentence under exceptional circumstances. But 12 years, that is exactly what the prosecutor asked for today, nothing less than 12 years. And so he's going to be sentenced on May 29th. The judge, I'm told, has not tipped her hand either way. But to give you some general context, this is a law that was constructed to really root out gun violence and just this wave of ammunition and firearms coming into Turks and Caicos from places like Haiti and even the U.S. But it was not meant to sweep up dads from Oklahoma and Pennsylvania who checked their bags or even took their bags through TSA checkpoints and still managed to get ammunition through there. But then it was found in Turks and Caicos. And now you have someone like Brian Haggerich and Ryan Watson who are there facing those very circumstances. And as a result of these previously lighter sentences, the country corrected course. The prosecutor who lost those now says, well, look, the Court of Appeals here says you've got to issue a jail sentence. I want 12 years. We talked to the spokesperson for Haggerich's family about what that would mean. What's the stakes? Take a listen.
They're going to miss their kids growing up. And it's pretty obvious from the record at the moment that their kids need their dads. You know, to hear about the impact, of, particularly on Brian and Ashley's daughter, has been profound for me.
And you talk, Tom, about exceptional circumstances. Mr. Haggerich's attorneys, they're arguing in court, not just that he came clean right away and said, these are my bullets. I certainly didn't mean to do it. But his kids are 6 and 4 years old. His older daughter having a really hard time right now trying to process this, obviously. And he has a mom with Parkinson's disease who needs his help, and he has medical complications. And the prosecutor is arguing, nope, no extenuating circumstances here. So that's kind of where we find the situation right now.
So as you suggested, and as that interview suggested, he's one of several Americans who's being held right now. And the country passed tougher laws because it's trying to fight gun violence, right? Coming from Haiti and the DR and elsewhere. Yep. You could imagine the judge is also under pressure not to give an exception to a guy from America.
She is. There was uproar in Turks and Caicos after you had these series of cases that were ending with a fine, and some of them included Americans with firearms, and they were only fined. So now, yes, you are seeing sort of the other end of the pendulum on this, and the reality as far as how this is going to affect the other cases, so many of these stories, Tom, are exactly the same. Fathers of young kids who had ammunition in bags from hunting trips months prior didn't realize, they say, that the ammunition was actually in the bag until they got to Turks and Caicos and then tried to leave. And now they have family members who are depending on them and wondering, are you really telling me I'm going to spend 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years in a prison hundreds of miles away from my family? That is the reality of the situation, and we'll see where the judge lands in less than a month.
Yeah, I think it's worth underscoring to anybody who's traveling. You need to know what the laws are in the country you're traveling to, and your excuse that you left ammo in a bag in America may not cut it in another country. And oh, by the way, you can check your gun and your ammo, but you got to do it legally with the TSA using a certified case. But that's for domestic travel. Doesn't matter if you're going overseas. A lot of these countries have no tolerance for guns and ammo. Sam, thank you very much. Sam Brock on the story for us. We're getting new details about the disappearance of 2 Australian surfer brothers and an American, as tonight family members say they are desperate for answers. Now, we told you about these brothers, Jake and Callum Robinson, and their friend Jack Carter. We talked about it on the show yesterday. They've been missing since Saturday while they were on a surfing trip to the Baja California area. Callum was regularly posting updates on social media for the first 2 days of the trip, and then suddenly he just stopped. We now know police have found abandoned tents and evidence linked to those 3 men. Local Mexican authorities say they're communicating with the FBI in this case. And we also know drug cartels are active in the area, and Baja California's chief prosecutor says they can't rule anything out until they find the men. We're waiting on more details as police in Mexico question 2 men and a woman possibly in connection to the case. NBC's Blaine Alexander joins us now. Blaine, the state prosecutor in Mexico says even though the missing persons report was filed 48 hours after they were last seen, police started looking into this right away, right? As soon as they had social media posts that caught their attention?
Yeah, Tom, and the story is one that's getting a lot of attention because this really is troubling on so many fronts. You know, this is an investigation that is already kind of spanning at least 3 different countries, 2 continents. Authorities there in Mexico say that they are in touch with officials both in the U.S. and in Australia. This is an area, Baja California, Mexico, that's very popular among surfers. In fact, growing in popularity over the past few years. And so that's why there's been so much social media chatter on this and concern over these 3 men. So let me kind of break down this timeline for you. You know, we know that as of April 27th, last Saturday, that was the last time that their family had been in contact with them. We're talking about 2 Australian brothers. Their mother posted on Facebook and basically said that that was the last day that she had heard from them. The missing persons report was filed 2 days later on the 29th. And then we know from Mexican officials that they have been kind of been searching the area where they believe that these men were last seen. They found some pieces of evidence, including a white pickup truck, that's something that they're looking into as well, in addition to questioning 3 individuals right now, Tom.
And the brother's mother back in Australia, I understand, has been posting on social media asking for help. Talk about that effort, the social media effort, and whether it's gaining any traction on the ground in Mexico.
I'll show you one of her statements, just a piece of her statement. She's basically talking about her son, saying Callum and Jake are beautiful human beings. We love them so much. This entire situation, she says, breaks their heart. Our only comfort right now is that they were together doing something they passionately love. It's something that struck a chord among so many people. One of the sons, Callum, was a professional lacrosse player. Both of them were avid surfers. And so that's why so many people really have been joining in this search, especially in the surfing community, Tom.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, we certainly are hoping for the best. Blaine, thank you very much. NBC News covers hundreds of stories each day, and it's awfully tough to read, watch, or listen to everything. So our teams, our bureau teams, have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions, and we call this the local. From our Western Bureau, 1 person is dead from a tuberculosis outbreak at a hotel in Long Beach, California. 9 others were hospitalized. Investigators say roughly 170 people might have been exposed to TB. City health officials, though, have declared, while they've declared a public health emergency, they say the outbreak appears confined and the general public is not at a big risk. Out of our Northeast Bureau, the new curfew starts tonight in Newark, New Jersey. It goes from 11 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. Kids under 18 have to stay within 100 yards of their homes. If they break the curfew, police could reach out to a violence prevention team who would then contact the parents. It's starting with Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, but will expand to 7 days a week come mid-June. The mayor says it's meant to help keep kids safe and bring crime down. And from our Southern Bureau, take a look at this. TSA officers found these snakes hidden in somebody's pants. They said that they were searching a passenger at the Miami airport, and they found the snakes in what seems to have been a sunglasses bag. The snakes were handed over to state fish and wildlife officials. And you can have the sunglasses, too. Coming up, the battle brewing over some billionaires' big plans to create a utopia in rural California. Okay, listen to this. It's from the ground up. And a lot of locals are not so happy. We're coming back with that. Back now with tonight's original in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight there's a fight brewing in a rural part of California. How does this sound? A brand new town from the ground up, all sparkling new. Tech entrepreneurs have a big, bold plan to build exactly that. But many people who live nearby are not happy about it. Some say they're being deceived by the developers. NBC's Alwyn Lopez has the story.
Right now, a major controversy hitting a fever pitch over this land in Northern California. A group of developers called California Forever have bold plans to turn this into the country's newest city. This week, announcing they collected over 20,000 signatures to put the project on the ballot in November and let voters decide if it should move forward. But some locals have been questioning the ways in which petitioners gathered those signatures. One person saying on Facebook that she was asked to sign a petition about health care, but claiming that among the petitions she was handed and on the same clipboard was one for the group trying to build the city. California Forever stated in part that opponents have, quote, been spreading misinformation regarding the petition and are, quote, attempting to create confusion. We spoke with the Solano County Registrar, and they confirmed all of the petitions are legitimate.
We are a right-to-farm county.
Those against the developments are deeply concerned about the plan to build a brand new city with room for more than 400,000 people. That's basically the population of Miami or Minneapolis.
They don't want to listen to our concerns.
Tech founder Jan Tramek is spearheading the project, backed by a group of Silicon Valley investors.
Land where for years and years, nothing much has been able to grow. Until now.
We used to build new cities all the time, but we haven't done it in 50 years, and so we knew that this would be controversial.
The proposal is that this giant city would be built from the ground up in a rural area with walkable neighborhoods, public transportation, sustainable homes, and California Forever has pledged to create about 15,000 new jobs in sectors like manufacturing and renewable energy.
I am super excited.
It's a major departure from car-centered cities growing in spots like Orlando or Houston. But the way they've gone about it has ruffled feathers. From 2017 to 2023, California Forever operated as a company called Flannery Associates, buying up $800 million worth of land in Solano County before ever revealing its plans. Then Flannery sued a group of landowners to the tune of $550 million, accusing them of conspiring to drive up the price of land. The lawsuit is still playing out in the Eastern District of California, and Solano County leaders are pushing back with other concerns over zoning, power, and water rights.
What do we need to do in the next 30 years? Is it this project?
Sadie Wilson is part of a new coalition called Solano Together. She believes the project's timeline is unrealistic.
Can we work together to make sure that we are building on our existing cities and investing in our communities?
But Tramek says it will solve the need for more housing and jobs. He also promises to invest in surrounding areas.
We have this amazing economic engine that produces all of these innovations, and we have been slowing it down by our inability to create room for growth and homes that people can afford.
There's so many pieces that we agree on, that there is a need for housing, there is a need for good jobs, but that is not what's on the ballot.
Both sides agree something has to change, but whether that means solely reinvesting in existing communities or starting from scratch, that is all up to the people of Solano County. Elwin Lopez, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Elwin, thank you. Good story there. Still to come from us, the very real concerns hanging over all the buzz and the excitement. And one of the most iconic horse races in the country. Are the horses safe this weekend? We'll be right back. You know, it's early May, and that means millions of people are set to tune in to the 150th annual Kentucky Derby tomorrow at the iconic Churchill Downs racetrack in Louisville. It's the fastest 2 minutes in sports, they say, with a top prize of $3 million for the winner. You know, there's all the excitement, the big Derby hats, the mint juleps, my personal favorite, but there are also real concerns over the safety of the horses after 12 connected to last year's Derby died within just days of the race. NBC's Jesse Kirsch is joining us now from Churchill Downs. Jesse, what's different this year when it comes to monitoring and caring for the horses that are competing in the Derby?
Yeah, and Tom, I just want to emphasize, no horses in the Derby last year died, right? There were horses that were in undercard races that were involved with the facility here in the days and weeks surrounding the Derby and on Derby Day, but not in the Derby itself last year, that died. A total of 12. That led to a suspension of racing here at Churchill Downs at one point as well. And we've asked regulators as well as the track about what changes were made this year. For the track's part, they're saying they're constantly trying to improve. It doesn't take injuries. It doesn't take deaths for them to make changes. They're constantly trying to improve here. Similar story from the regulatory body, HISA, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. And what's interesting about that organization is this year, they essentially have their full force on hand because their anti-doping regimen came online in time for this year's Kentucky Derby. So they are at full force with the regulatory oversight nationwide at this point. As for the track, we talked with the chief equine officer, the chief veterinarian officer here at the Churchill Downs racetrack about changes they make here, their incorporation of technology and the like. Here's part of what he shared with us.
We're working with a couple different third-party companies to help develop some risk factor assessment tools. In our industry, we know what many of our risk factors are for horses. We're trying to look outside the box and see if we can use computer-aided technology to help us identify risk factors that traditionally we haven't known about.
He also said they had a piloted sensor program they're now using on all the Derby horses again, Tom.
Hey, buddy, what's the vibe there right now, given the, the past that they're trying to work through and correct? But what's the feeling? Is there a feeling of excitement right now?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you can tell, Tom, it just started raining here. They just wrapped up the Kentucky Oaks, which is the big Friday race here, so everyone is clearing out. The rain held off just in time for that race to wrap up. Hopefully the skies will clear tomorrow, but we met some people earlier who were here in the morning excited because it is Derby weekend in Louisville. Tom?
Okay, grab your top hat, Jesse. Thanks very much. Jesse Kirsch, who's right there outside of Louisville. That is a wrap for us at this hour. The coverage resumes on News Now, right now. Top of the hour tonight, a bombshell indictment for a sitting congressman. The DOJ says he and his wife took hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes from foreign groups. The charges that could put him away for the rest of his life. In New York, one of former President Trump's closest former aides broke down at his criminal trial today. The grilling on the stand that pushed Hope Hicks to tears. In Texas, more tornadoes touching down tonight as the state braces for more devastating flooding. Our team is in the thick of it. And new details tonight on how one man caught bird flu from a cow. Why health officials are urging the public not to worry, at least not yet. Then China launching its most ambitious moon mission yet. How they're trying to make history on the far side of the moon. That's coming up. Good day, I'm Tom Costello. I'm in for Hallie, and in just the last few hours, a House Democrat hit with serious federal bribery charges. Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas, as well as his wife, charged by the DOJ with accepting bribes from a company controlled by the government of Azerbaijan, as well as a Mexican bank. The end game, according to prosecutors, was to influence U.S. policy to benefit the country and the bank. The indictment comes after a raid on Cuellar's home and campaign office back in 2022. There's the video. You can see the footage. Cuellar was at one point the co-chair of the Congressional Azerbaijan Caucus. In a statement, Cuellar denies all wrongdoing, saying he still does plan to run for re-election in November. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries says Cuellar will take leave from one of his committee assignments, but he is not calling for the indicted congressman to step down, at least not yet. Cuellar, though, becomes the second member of Congress in less than a year to face bribery charges. New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez set to go on trial later this year. NBC's Ken Delanian is following this for us. And Ken, just what were these Azerbaijani and Mexican deals allegedly all about? What were they hoping to get out of Cuellar?
Official acts, Tom, and in particular, the government of Azerbaijan, according to this indictment, was seeking Cuellar's help in trying to influence U.S. policy in the direction of Azerbaijan. They're in a war with Armenia. American foreign policy has some interest there, and they were looking for specific things. And the indictment doesn't say exactly whether they got them, but it says that Cuellar essentially sold his office and agreed to do them. It says that Cuellar and his wife took nearly $600,000 in bribes and laundered them through sham contracts, which were paid to shell companies controlled by Imelda Cuellar. And it says that she did little or no work for those companies, but that the congressman, again, promised official action. And what's really significant here is that in addition to being charged with bribery and money laundering and honest services mail fraud, which are typical corruption charges, he's charged with acting as an unregistered agent for a foreign government. And like Bob Menendez, he's essentially the second lawmaker in a year charged with selling his office to a foreign government. That's deeply significant, Tom.
Well, I was just going to ask you about that because people are going to draw comparisons between this case and Senator Menendez's case. Is that fair? Should they?
Yes, absolutely. They're very similar cases. Now, the evidence against Bob Menendez in terms of the gold bars and cash seized by the FBI in his house is so visceral and so strong that you have people calling for his resignation. We're not seeing those similar calls, at least from Democrats today with Henry Cuellar. And that may be because, look, everyone in Washington knows these cases are hard to win. The Justice Department has had some of them blow up in their face before. They really have to show a quid pro quo here. They have to show evidence that he actually got paid to do official acts, and that's difficult. We don't know all the evidence in this case, but the indictment, Tom, seems very strong.
Ken Delanian covering it all at Justice. Thank you very much. Now to potentially the biggest bombshell testimony yet in Donald Trump's trial. The Democratic moments make that the dramatic moments when the woman who had a front row seat to everything that we've been talking about in this trial, she then broke down in tears on the stand. This woman, Hope Hicks, an aide who the former president treated like a daughter, she led Trump's campaign communications when the alleged scheme took place to bury embarrassing stories. That was before he brought her to the White House for some of its top roles. But now she hasn't spoken to him in 2 years. Today, prosecutors wanted to know what happened behind the scenes when this moment made headlines, the infamous Access Hollywood tape. Then candidate Trump caught on camera making vulgar comments about assaulting women. Hicks, who was Trump's press secretary at the time, says she did not know about the tape until she heard from a reporter and that there was a consensus that, quote, this was going to be a crisis. The big question, why does this matter, rather, for the case? Let's hit the rewind for just a moment to get through all of this. Hicks says she called Michael Cohen, Trump's former fixer at the time, to ask if there was another tape that would need damage control. That happened in early October 2016. Later that month, prosecutors say damage control kicked in with the alleged hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, who claims she had an affair with Trump. Trump denies it. And that is the reason that we are here, why the former president faces 34 counts of falsifying business records to which he has pleaded not guilty. NBC's Von Hilliard is outside the courtroom. He's been watching this all along throughout the entire case. Von, let's start with what the prosecution was hoping to get out of Hicks today, to paint this picture of Donald Trump as fully in control and to make this line from the Access Hollywood tape to the Stormy Daniels situation and the payoff. What did we hear today to that end?
Right, Tom. They wanted to use Hope Hicks to set her up to this jury that she was such a crucial witness because of how small Donald Trump's inner circle was, particularly in 2015 and 2016 on that campaign when she was serving as his press secretary. When she was asked by the prosecution who was doing comms for you guys, who was doing press, she said, it was just me and Mr. Trump. She said the team that included the bodyguard as well as the campaign manager were all just following his lead. This really, for the jury, was the prosecution's opportunity to present to them somebody who had been a longtime confidant, even before he became a presidential candidate, when she worked for him at the Trump Organization in 2014, to say this testimony is credible. This is somebody who had the ear all the way to the end of Donald Trump's presidency.
But the defense helped her out a little bit on cross-examination, right? Because specifically there was this criticism of Michael Cohen.
Right. Michael Cohen is going to be that key witness here that will potentially take the stand, who is the one who paid that $130,000 to Stormy Daniels. And when Hope Hicks was talked about Michael Cohen, she said, look, he never actually had a formal role on the campaign, and that for all intents and purposes, he would insert himself at certain moments, she said, but he wasn't supposed to be on any campaign in any official capacity. There were things he did in a voluntary capacity because of his interest, she said. But then when asked about her conversations with Donald Trump in 2018, when the story was first coming to light about the Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels arrangement, she said that Donald Trump had, suggested to her, that it was being happy that, and kind of surprised that Michael Cohen would take this stance, and that she herself said he wasn't exactly a charitable or selfless person, in her own words. He was the kind of person who seeks credit, sort of surprised that Michael Cohen would somehow do this, arrange $130,000 from his own home equity line of credit to pay off Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election without that $130,000 coming from somewhere.
Yeah, the idea that he did it on his own, she argues, is just too much to believe. Listen, we mentioned that Hicks became emotional on the stand, and we remember that Hicks and Trump haven't spoken for years. What did our NBC colleagues, because you weren't able to be in there, but what did our NBC colleagues in the courtroom see in terms of the dynamics between Trump and Hicks?
Right. They said this is somebody, again, who worked for him for about 8 years. And when she entered the courtroom there and took the stand, she did not make eye contact directly with Donald Trump. But instead, while he was staring at her, she openly admitted to the court that she was nervous. And then when cross-examination began, when Donald Trump's attorney began asking questions, within about a minute, she broke down in tears. And court had to pause for a moment as she was able to collect herself and regroup. And upon leaving the courtroom, our team inside of producers and reporters said that there was sort of a solemnness when she walked out. Again, this is somebody who she was very close to, very loyal, that she not only had the Trump organization, the Trump campaign, but then ultimately he made her the communications director. And this is a moment in which she acknowledged that she hadn't talked to him since 2022. And she was paying her own legal bills, not Donald Trump, yet one where these were two individuals had a close relationship and as well as their families, and one that was clearly a difficult day for her as she testified under oath, Tom.
Vaughn Hilliard, who's been on the story all week. Thank you, Vaughn. We have breaking news just into us in the last few minutes. A bunch of tornado reports all across Texas are popping up, just one after another. That means the state's hitting its 9th straight day of tornado activity. And you can see some of it right there. Tornadoes out there in what is called a multi-vortex, an incredibly dangerous situation. Basically involves two separate tornadoes spinning around each other. Texas has really been struggling, cannot catch a break from these twisters. Check out this near Hallie, a massive cone right there. And they can't catch a break from other kinds of weather either. With the Houston area right now bracing for a long weekend of more intense flooding, weather experts are warning locals evacuate now if you can or be ready to stay put for days. Millions of people in and around Houston are at the center of all of this. They're dealing with flood watches in effect right now. The evacuation order comes after the region took an absolute beating on Thursday. Listen to this. As much as 12 inches of rain coming down in some parts of Texas. That caused rivers to overflow with intense flooding, and it's led to scary scenes. Imagine being in that car. Folks pulled from their cars after flash floods came out of nowhere. NBC's Kathy Park is in Conroe, Texas for us. Kathy, how are folks there dealing with this extreme weather and more on the way?
Well, Tom, I can tell you a lot of these folks were kind of caught off guard by the storm. They received the warnings, but they weren't anticipating the damage that we're seeing right now. In fact, let me give you an example. We're standing in a backyard, and right behind me, this is now the San Jacinto River. Typically, we're told that this is roughly 3 acres of land, and the river is several hundreds of yards away from where we are standing right now. So this is just an incredible scene. And the water rose very quickly. In fact, the homeowner told us earlier today that the water came on early yesterday morning, and she had to evacuate, grab what she could, and got out. She came back earlier today just to kind of assess the damage, and you can see all the dirt, debris inside the home. And she said she got about a foot of water inside her home, so a lot of cleanup ahead. But Tom, businesses are also suffering too. In fact, we spoke with the GM of a nursery not too far from here. His business is also right by the river, and he's saying his losses are in the hundreds of thousands. Take a listen.
Being as though they opened up the dam in the middle of the day, we just kind of had to watch our business float away in a sense.
Wow.
It's definitely tough, but you know we're gonna do everything it takes to get back into gear and be ready for our customers and our staff. You know, these guys, this is everybody's career, so we're gonna take it super serious.
And that was Steve. He was telling us that he was looking forward to a busy weekend ahead, and now he is spending the day cleaning up with his staff, and hopefully they're able to salvage some of those plants, trees, and shrubs. So not only are they cleaning up, but also keeping close watch on the skies, because we are monitoring more severe weather in the forecast now through the weekend.
You know, anybody who's had a dishwasher overflows knows what a mess that is. Imagine a foot of water in your house. Goodness gracious. Kathy Park, thank you very much. All right, tonight, college campuses are trying to bring some a semblance of normalcy back after 2 weeks of arrests and chaos, though it looks like in some places that may not be stopping protesters. Take a look at protesters headed to New York, make that NYU in New York, just in the last few minutes. The scene across the country really is going one of two ways to slow down the sort of thing, either by force, with deals with university administrators being the other option. On the one hand, you have scenes like this, the NYPD today clearing out encampments at the New School and NYU. 43 people arrested at the New School, 13 at NYU. At Portland State University, campus is back open after police evicted protesters occupying the campus library, threatening to use force if people resisted arrest. But there's also schools working with protesters. Rutgers president says protesters there, the protests ended peacefully once college management reached an agreement with protesters. That happened after the school set a 4 p.m. deadline yesterday to clear the encampment. NBC Steve Patterson joins us now from UCLA. Steve, it's a quieter Friday, relatively, but that doesn't mean student activism is not spreading, right? Where do things stand where you are right now?
Well, much quieter here at the campus of UCLA. The loudest thing I can hear right now are birds chirping, which is incredible to think about. Just about 30 hours or so ago, you wouldn't be able to see the space behind me. This is now transformed back into a college quad. A little while ago, it was a city of tents and plywood that is so thick that Royce Hall, which is behind me, wouldn't be visible at all. That, of course, is all changed after that police action, the sweep that was here, police using essentially shock and awe to take down this encampment very swiftly throughout the night. The latest numbers we have, more than 200 arrests. That may be somewhere now around 210. The official line is that there were very, very few injuries. That comes from police. It is a different story, though, when you speak to protesters, and we have now spoken to several post that police action, including one, her name is Blair, who says she was struck with a police baton over and over and over again before being arrested. Here's what she told me. Listen to this.
I was repeatedly being hit by a baton over and over and over again until I couldn't breathe. I came because I had friends who said they were in danger, and I didn't want my friends to be in danger. We were there peacefully. We were just there, peaceful student protesters trying to protest the genocide.
There is, of course, reporting across the country about outside agitators, about outside groups infiltrating these movements. I asked that question to some of the protesters. They said this is largely a student movement, but the chancellor has promised a full-throated investigation of everything that went on here. Tom?
You know, Steve, we've also heard from Jewish students who couldn't even get to class, were not allowed to walk down the sidewalk on campus. They were being asked for their political affiliation in order to walk on their own campus that they'd paid tuition for. But I understand that you talked to a media liaison from the encampment, and what is she telling you about where their movement goes from here?
Yeah, I just spoke just a few minutes ago. I asked that she's fresh from being arrested, as a lot of their movement is. There were several arrests, and she's claiming multiple injuries as well. So they're still sort of recuperating, licking their wounds, as it were. She tells me, though, they're going to be back in force. Here is exactly what she told me. Listen to this.
We're not done. As long as the university has not divested, as long as there's a genocide happening in Gaza, we are not done.
And I started to elaborate. Does that mean establishment of the same encampment? Does that mean a fresh new encampment somewhere else on campus? Will campus allow that? They said at this point, again, they're still recuperating after that police action. They don't have those answers, but they said also that until the university divests, until their demands are made, they aren't going anywhere. We don't know what that means yet, Tom, but that's the official line. Back to you.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much. New details tonight about one of the first cases of bird flu spreading from a cow to a human. A Texas dairy worker caught the virus from a sick cow back in late March. He did not have any typical flu symptoms, no fever, no coughing, no sneezing. He did have a bad case of pink eye. Swabs of the man's eye and nose showed the same strain of bird flu that was circulating in dairy cows. He was treated with Tamiflu and told to isolate as he recovered. But there's a real concern that the virus could mutate as it spreads from birds to cows and humans, and that there may be more cases out there. NBC's Erica Edwards is joining us now. Erica, how concerning is the threat that this virus could spread on cattle farms. Let's just first talk about farms itself.
Yeah, well, it's pretty clear that this virus has been spreading undetected on dairy farms for months and will likely continue to spread. So far, more than 100 people have been asked to monitor themselves for symptoms after coming into contact with a sick cow. About 25 of those have been tested. So far, all of those test results have come back negative. And there's no evidence yet that this is spreading from person to person, but you're exactly right. That's the fear, that the longer this circulates uncontrolled among cattle, the more likely it will be that it could mutate to spread more easily from person to person. The report's authors today said that rapid implementation of preventive measures is recommended to reduce human exposures to any infected animals and environments contaminated by them. And, experts say that there are very likely additional cases because a lot of farmers simply don't want to be tested for fear that a positive result will impact their livelihood. Tom?
Absolutely. And, we just went through this global pandemic and we're not there yet, but are we prepared if bird flu were to mutate and then spread into another type of pandemic situation?
This past week, the CDC said that they have 2 vaccines prepped just in case it's ever needed. Both of those are in the nation's emergency stockpile. Right now, there aren't many doses, but the CDC said that they could ramp up quickly and begin shipping doses within weeks. Tom?
Okay, Erica, thank you very much. A rare, successful piece of bipartisan legislation is waiting on the president's signature tonight, a bill outlining new steps to monitor the online exploitation of children. The bill, called the Report Act, helps strengthen the national tip line that deals with reports of online wrongdoing against kids. That tip line, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, said that it has received more than 36 million reports of online exploitation or abuse in 2023, a 360% increase compared to a decade ago. A stat that resonates with parents like Jennifer Buta, whose son died by suicide after falling victim to a so-called sextortion scheme where he was blackmailed over sending an intimate photo. NBC's Julie Surkin spoke to her.
Once he sent that photo, everything changed for him. They put the pressure on. They wanted money. Restrictions need to be placed on these companies that have applications that are allowing these predators to just go online freely and come for our youth.
So NBC's Julie Surkin joins me now, and she's also got an exclusive interview with the 2 Senate co-sponsors of the bill. Julie, break down why some are calling this a game changer when it comes to protecting kids online.
Well, Tom, believe it or not, this is one of the only pieces of legislation in recent years, I should say the most major piece of legislation that actually cracks down on what's going on social media platforms, online, when it comes to kids, when it comes to minors, and really forces them to act when it comes to reporting those sexually explicit images of minors, some that lead to the sextortion schemes like you heard Jennifer lay out there. Unfortunately, she is part of a very long list of parents who had to deal with this over the last couple of years. The growing use of social media, unfettered access, no matter what they do, no matter how much they try to help. She told me it's really up to the social media companies to be held accountable for what goes on their platform. So this bill is a big deal. I want you to take a listen first to what Senators Ossoff and Blackburn, they're a Republican and a Democrat, really couldn't be more different, what they did to come together on this issue, and now one that passed the House and the Senate unanimously is sitting on President Biden's desk waiting for a signature.
Children get online, and it's the Wild West. And there are bad people lurking on the internet who want to prey on children.
We need to fix this, because once you identify a pedophile and once you want to get this individual into court, then sometimes they were getting off simply because of constraints that were in the way.
Tom, this bill will completely modernize the way these tips are processed by NCMEC, by that Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They said in a statement, quote, "We're thrilled that this bill will be signed into law very soon so we can begin to plan for and implement many of the measures the Report Act will enable. While we applaud the passage of this act, there is definitely more to be done legislatively. And I have to tell you, having covered this issue, there is a lot that Congress is trying to do in the coming weeks."
All right, Julie, thank you. Good reporting from Capitol Hill. Thank you so much. Coming up, new warnings tonight in Berlin. Why people there are being told to stay indoors. Plus, the U.S. economy added fewer jobs than expected last month. But that could actually be good news, especially for your wallet, and we're going to explain when we come back. And we're getting new details about the disappearance of two Australian surfer brothers and an American, as tonight family members say they are desperate for answers. Now, we told you about these brothers, Jake and Callum Robinson, and their friend Jack Carter on the show yesterday. They've been missing since Saturday while they were on a surfing trip to the Baja California area. Callum was regularly posting updates on social media for the first 2 days of the trip, and then suddenly he stopped. We now know police have found abandoned tents and evidence linked to the three men. Local Mexican authorities say they are communicating with the FBI in the case. We also know drug cartels are active in that area. And Baja California's chief prosecutor says they can't rule anything out until they find the group. We are waiting on more details as police in Mexico question two men and a woman in connection with the case. NBC's Blaine Alexander joins me now. Blaine, the state prosecutor says even though the missing persons report was filed 48 hours after they were last seen, police started looking into this right away, right? As soon as they had social media posts that caught their attention?
Yeah, Tom, and the story is one that's getting a lot of attention because this really is troubling on so many fronts. You know, this is an investigation that is already kind of spanning at least 3 different countries, 2 continents. Authorities there in Mexico say that they are in touch with officials both in the U.S. and in Australia. This is an area, Baja California, Mexico, that's very popular among surfers. In fact, growing in popularity over the past few years. And so that's why there's been so much social media chatter on this and concern over these 3 men. So let me kind of break down this timeline for you. You know, we know that as of April 27th, last Saturday, that was the last time that their family had been in contact with them. We're talking about 2 Australian brothers. Their mother posted on Facebook and basically said that that was the last day that she had heard from them. The missing persons report was filed 2 days later on the 29th. And then we know from Mexican officials that they have been kind of been searching the area where they believe that these men were last seen. They found some pieces of evidence, including a white pickup truck, that's something that they're looking into as well, in addition to questioning 3 individuals right now, Tom.
And the brother's mother back in Australia, I understand, has been posting on social media asking for help. Talk about that effort, the social media effort, and whether it's gaining any traction on the ground in Mexico.
I'll show you one of her statements, just a piece of her statement. She's basically talking about her son, saying Callum and Jake are beautiful human beings. We love them so much. This entire situation, she says, breaks their heart. Our only comfort right now is that they were together doing something they passionately love. It's something that struck a chord among so many people. One of the sons, Callum, was a professional lacrosse player. Both of them were avid surfers. And so that's why so many people really have been joining in this search, especially in the surfing community, Tom.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, we certainly are hoping for the best. Blaine, thank you very much. Tonight, disturbing new reporting about a police youth program linked to nearly 200 allegations of sex abuse and misconduct across the country. An investigation by the Marshall Project in partnership with NBC News finds that law enforcement personnel are accused of grooming, sexually abusing, or engaging in some type of inappropriate behavior with teens and young adults enrolled in an Explorer program, as it's called. The majority of those affected are teenage girls, some as young as 13. The program was created by the Boy Scouts of America. It's sort of a mentorship or even an internship program with local law enforcement agencies. It's been running for decades. According to the investigation, officers accused of abusing teens spanned in the ranks from patrolmen all the way up to chiefs of police. Some were department veterans known in their communities for the work they did. Others had been barely working at their agencies for a year or so. Now, a lot of those cases have led to criminal charges, but in some cases, officers were not even required to register as sex offenders. In other cases, officers got to keep their jobs after a reprimand or just a short suspension. The Boy Scouts, which sets the guidelines for the Explorer programs, tells the Marshall Project in a statement it is committed to holding offenders, in its words, accountable. Lucas, One of the reporters who's working on the piece for us right now is helping us to break it all down. She's a writer on the project, and she joins us. Can you give us a little bit more here? Now, we understand that many of these cases resulted in some sort of charges or consequences, but there's one community near Boston where people are still asking for justice. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so our story really centers on one woman in particular. Her name is Sandra Birchmore. And when she was 13 years old, she joined her local police explorer post in Stoughton, Massachusetts, which is about an hour outside of Boston. And she really admired police officers. She wanted to become an officer one day. And she stayed in the program from age 13 all the way through high school. About a decade later, so February 2021, she was 23 years old and newly pregnant, and she was found dead from an apparent suicide. One of the last people believed to have seen her alive was one of the officers that she met through the program, through the Explorer post. And an internal police investigation conducted after her death found that that officer, as well as his brother, who was an officer and also an Explorer mentor, as well as a third officer who was a veteran who oversaw the program, had separate sexual relationships with Sandra in her early 20s. After her death, her family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the three officers as well as the Stoughton Police Department in the town of Stoughton. That lawsuit is ongoing, and earlier this year, a judge in a ruling allowing that lawsuit to continue, a part of his decision included text messages that the police investigation uncovered in which one of the officers acknowledges having sex with Sandra when she was 15 years old. The officers have denied any wrongdoing. They have all resigned from their jobs with the police department, and they are not currently facing any criminal charges. It's been just over 3 years since she died, and thousands of people have signed an online petition calling for further investigation into her death and the circumstances of her life. And more than 5,000 people have joined a Facebook group called Justice for Sandra Birchmore, calling for the same.
Yeah, Lakeitra, this investigation found that there was really a lack of oversight, right? And that kind of allowed the abuse to happen. I knew a lot of my fellow high schoolers back in the day, and that were in these Explore programs. Any indication at all that things have changed, that there's more oversight or better oversight, or is that up to individual police departments?
That's a great question. What we found in terms of the response from police departments really depended on the locale. Some departments, when officers were charged or convicted of sexual abuse or misconduct, they just ceased operating their Explorer programs, while other departments have tried to put more rules in place. For instance, explicitly banning fraternization between Explorer participants and officers, or limiting certain aspects of the program. One huge aspect of Explorer Post is the ride-along, where participants can accompany officers. But this can take the entire patrol shift and sometimes happen overnight. So some departments have reduced that to maybe 1 or 4 hours, or there's a debriefing that might happen afterward, or they've tried to ensure that participants are not just interacting with one specific officer, that they are interacting with several officers in the program. And what experts have told us is that a crucial part of continuing Explorer programs is less isolation for participants and more transparency when it comes to the rules and policies that are in place, and communicating that not just to the officers, but to the participants and their parents.
Lakeitra Chavis, who is with the Marshall Project. Lakeitra, thank you for your reporting. Nice job. Thank you. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, a disturbing situation in Pittsburgh. A woman now dead after a strange construction accident. An initial investigation found that a large metal drum somehow escaped the construction site, rolled down a hill, broke through a fence, then eventually hit the woman on the sidewalk. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Number 2, Canadian police have arrested and charged 3 men in the murder of a Sikh separatist leader. You'll remember the leader was killed in Canada last year. They're looking into whether the suspects are tied to the Indian government. And Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is suggesting the Indian government might have been involved, starting a big feud between Canada and India. Number 3, demolition now underway on that I-95 overpass in Norwalk, Connecticut. Remember, parts of the highway shut down in the last 24 hours after a fuel truck collided with 2 other cars, bursting into flames. The state's governor says heat from that fire damaged the overpass, so crews have had to tear down the bridge on the critical interstate. Demolition could take 24 hours or more to finish, and the highway itself could be closed until Monday. Number 4, the U.S. economy added fewer jobs than expected in April, while the unemployment rate grew by a tick. Now, that may actually be good news because that means the economy is slowing, which could allow the Fed to consider cutting interest rates in the fall, as soon as the fall. The stock market liked that development. It rallied before the closing bell on that possibility. Number 5, the White House presenting the Presidential Medal of Freedom to 19 recipients in just the last hour, including civil rights activist Clarence B. Jones, pro swimmer Katie Ledecky, and former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. You can see the ceremony right there. The White House says those honored have made exemplary contributions to the prosperity, the values, or the security of the United States. When we come back, China launching a historic mission to the moon, and our team saw it happen firsthand live. What mission officials are telling our own Janice Mackey-Frayer about the far side of the moon. Don't call it the dark side. Plus, the dramatic rescue caught on cam in Brazil. We're coming back. NBC covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it's tough to read, watch, or listen to all of them, we've got teams around the world doing it for you and for me. Here's what they say they're watching. We call it the global. Out of Brazil, heavy rains in the southern part of the country have now killed at least 39 people. Local emergency rescue teams are saying that 68 others are still missing in the worst flooding Brazil has seen in 80 years. Take a look at this. You can see a helicopter rescuing people from a rooftop. Authorities say more than 20,000 people are getting forced to evacuate from their homes. From Pakistan now, take a look. A bus plunging into a ravine, killing 20 people and hurting more than a dozen others, that according to the local authorities. The bus was headed towards a popular tourist spot in the northern part of the country before the crash. And from Germany, huge smoke clouds rising from a metalworking factory building in Berlin after a big fire broke out there. Firefighters are worried the smoke might have toxic chemicals in it, and they're asking people to stay inside, close their windows, turn off the AC. The cause of the fire there is still not clear. China today launched what may be its most ambitious lunar mission yet, to the far side of the moon. By the way, the dark side is a Pink Floyd album. So it's a rocket. Now, it's racing to get there. And if successful, it'll be the first mission of its kind. The goal, collect rocks and debris that could help us understand the moon's origins. It's a huge milestone for China, which is aiming to land astronauts on the moon by the end of the decade. And it's a marker of a new space race shaping up, not just for the moon, but for all of that space between the Earth and the moon. NBC international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer was on the launch and joins me now. Janice, you know me, I'm jealous. This was quite an historic moment, right? What was it like to watch it from the ground?
Well, we arrived at the launch site. The skies were somewhat clear. We could see the rocket ready in the distance, and then it got darker and darker, Tom. And there was one point where we weren't sure the launch was going to happen because there was heavy rain and a thunderstorm rolling in. But as scheduled, it lifted off at 5:27 p.m. local time. We couldn't see the rocket with much clarity, but boy, could we feel it. The ground was shaking. The noise became deafening as this historic mission lifted off. And around this island, there were tens of thousands of people who who were watching too. Earlier in the day, we went to one of the beaches that offered one of the better views of the launch site. Some of the people there have been camping out for 3 days just to be able to claim a spot to watch this mission. Because along with China's space ambitions and the growth of its program here and the advances that the program has made, there's been the rise of this space tourism industry, and it is a source of excitement. It's a source of national pride. And for the towns around here, it's the source of a new economy as China is pushing towards these new goals, and that big one of landing Chinese astronauts on the moon by 2030.
Yeah, so let's talk about the space race, because America has been hoping that next year they would have astronauts looping around the moon and then landing on the moon in 2026 or 27. I think that's looking increasingly unlikely. We just had a new, Inspector General report suggesting NASA has got significant engineering challenges right now. But this is a real race. And, oh, by the way, China is targeting to put humans on the exact same spot that NASA wants to put humans on at the South Pole.
Well, it is a real race that's shaping up, and one that experts say is going to take innovation, technology, and, of course, huge infusions of capital in order to win the race. And that's what China has as part of its momentum. China's space program is a goal of the president here, Xi Jinping. It is being pushed through, and they have very clear targets. They want to be landing on the lunar South Pole in 2026, and they expect to be building a lunar base by 2036. The issue, of course, Tom, is the coalition that China would bring with it to lunar exploration. There are concerns about this partnership with Russia that was announced last year, that they would work together to build this lunar base. So beyond the scientific implications and possibilities that China's exploration would bring, there are also the geopolitical considerations and the geopolitical concerns. The head of U.S. Space Command saying recently that China was advancing at breathtaking speed, and that for him is a worry. Tom?
Yeah. Janice, thank you. Janice Mackey-Frayer, who's on the ground for us there. An American tourist waiting months to learn his fate must now wait a couple weeks longer after he says he accidentally brought ammunition in his luggage to Turks and Caicos. 39-year-old Brian Hagerich appeared in court today for the first time since he was detained back in February. He was heading home with his family when he was arrested. He faces up to 12 years in prison. The judge's decision is expected later this month and could have an impact for other Americans who are detained on that British territory for similar reasons. NBC's Sam Brock joins us now. Sam, there were no cameras allowed in court, I understand. Walk us through what happened at this hearing today.
In some respects, Tom, it was kind of stunning because I think the expectation was, sure, there's a mandatory minimum of 12 years, but there's been previous cases where there were only fines, or in one case, an 8-month sentence under exceptional circumstances. But 12 years, that is exactly what the prosecutor asked for today, nothing less than 12 years. And so he's going to be sentenced on May 29th. The judge, I'm told, has not tipped her hand either way. But to give you some general context, this is a law that was constructed to really root out gun violence and just this wave of ammunition and firearms coming into Turks and Caicos from places like Haiti and even the U.S. But it was not meant to sweep up dads from Oklahoma and Pennsylvania who checked their bags or even took their bags through TSA checkpoints and still managed to get ammunition through there, but then it was found in Turks and Caicos. And now you have someone like Brian Hagerich and Ryan Watson who are there facing those very circumstances. And as a result of these previously lighter sentences, the country corrected course. The prosecutor who lost those now says, well, look, the Court of Appeals here says you've got to issue a jail sentence. I want 12 years. We talked to the spokesperson for Hagerich's family about what that would mean. What's the stakes? Take a listen.
They're going to miss their kids growing up. And it's pretty obvious from the record at the moment that their kids need their dads. You know, to hear about the impact, particularly on Brian and Ashley's daughter, has been profound for me.
And you talk, Tom, about exceptional circumstances. Mr. Hagrich's attorneys, they're arguing in court, not just that he came clean right away and said, these are my bullets, I certainly didn't mean to do it, but his kids are 6 and 4 years old. His older daughter having a really hard time right now trying to process this, obviously. And he has a mom with Parkinson's disease who needs his help, and he has medical complications. And the prosecutor is arguing, nope, no extenuating circumstances here. So that's kind of where we find the situation right now.
So as you suggested, and as that interview suggested, he's one of several Americans who's being held right now. And the country passed tougher laws because it's trying to fight gun violence, right? Coming from Haiti and the DR and elsewhere. You could imagine the judge is also under pressure not to give an exception to a guy from America.
She is. There was uproar in Turks and Caicos after you had these series of cases that were ending with a fine, and some of them included Americans with firearms, and they were only fined. So now, yes, you are seeing sort of the other end of the pendulum on this, and the reality as far as how this is going to affect the other cases, so many of these stories, Tom, are exactly the same. Fathers of young kids who had ammunition in bags from hunting trips months prior didn't realize, they say, that the ammunition was actually in the bag until they got to Turks and Caicos and then tried to leave. And now they have family members who are depending on them and wondering, are you really telling me I'm going to spend 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years in a prison hundreds of miles away from my family? That is the reality of the situation, and we'll see where the judge lands in less than a month.
Yeah, I think it's worth underscoring to anybody who's traveling. You need to know what the laws are in the country you're traveling to, and your excuse that you left ammo in a bag in America may not cut it in another country. And oh, by the way, you can check your gun and your ammo, but you got to do it legally with the TSA using a certified case. But that's for domestic travel. Doesn't matter if you're going overseas. A lot of these countries have no tolerance for guns and ammo. Sam, thank you very much. Sam Brock on the story for us. Coming up, the battle brewing over some billionaires' big plans to create a utopia in rural California. Okay, listen to this. It's from the ground up. And a lot of locals are not so happy. We're coming back with that. Back now with tonight's original in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight there's a fight brewing in a rural part of California. How does this sound? A brand new town from the ground up, all sparkling new. Tech entrepreneurs have a big, bold plan to build exactly that. But many people who live nearby are not happy about it. Some say they're being deceived by the developers. NBC's Ellen Lopez has the story.
Right now, a major controversy hitting a fever pitch over this land in Northern California. A group of developers called California Forever have bold plans to turn this into the country's newest city. This week, announcing they collected over 20,000 signatures to put the project on the ballot in November and let voters decide if it should move forward. But some locals have been questioning the ways in which petitioners gathered those signatures. One person saying on Facebook that she was asked to sign a petition about health care, but claiming that among the petitions she was handed and on the same clipboard was one for the group trying to build the city. California Forever stated in part that opponents have, quote, been spreading misinformation regarding the petition and are, quote, attempting to create confusion. We spoke with the Solano County Registrar, and they confirmed all of the petitions are legitimate.
We are a right-to-farm county.
Those against the developments are deeply concerned about the plan to build a brand new city with room for more than 400,000 people. That's basically the population of Miami or Minneapolis.
They don't want to listen to our concerns.
Tech founder Jan Tromek is spearheading the project, backed by a group of Silicon Valley investors.
Land where for years and years, nothing much has been able to grow. Until now.
We used to build new cities all the time, but we haven't done it in 50 years, and so we knew that this would be controversial.
The proposal is that this giant city would be built from the ground up in a rural area with walkable neighborhoods, public transportation, sustainable homes, and California Forever has pledged to create about 15,000 new jobs in sectors like manufacturing and renewable energy.
I am super excited.
It's a major departure from car-centered cities growing in spots like Orlando or Houston. But the way they've gone about it has ruffled feathers. From 2017 to 2023, California Forever operated as a company called Flannery Associates, buying up $800 million worth of land in Solano County before ever revealing its plans. Then Flannery sued a group of landowners to the tune of $550 million, accusing them of conspiring to drive up the price of land. The lawsuit is still playing out in the Eastern District of California, and Solano County leaders are pushing back with other concerns over zoning, power, and water rights.
What do we need to do in the next 30 years? Is it this project?
Sadie Wilson is part of a new coalition called Solano Together. She believes the project's timeline is unrealistic.
Can we work together to make sure that we are building on our existing cities and investing in our communities?
But Schromick says it will solve the need for more housing and jobs. He also promises to invest in surrounding areas.
We have this amazing economic engine that produces all of these innovations, and we have been slowing it down by our inability to create room for growth and homes that people can afford.
There's so many pieces that we agree on, that there is a need for housing, there is a need for good jobs, but that is not what's on the ballot.
Both sides agree something has to change, but whether that means solely reinvesting in existing communities or starting from scratch, that is all up to the people of Solano County. Elwin Lopez, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Elwin, thank you. Good story there. Still to come from us, the very real concerns hanging over all the buzz and the excitement. And one of the most iconic horse races in the country. Are the horses safe this weekend? We'll be right back. You know, it's early May, and that means millions of people are set to tune in to the 150th annual Kentucky Derby tomorrow at the iconic Churchill Downs racetrack in Louisville. It's the fastest 2 minutes in sports, they say, with a top prize of $3 million for the winner. You know, there's all the excitement, the big Derby hats, the mint juleps, my personal favorite, but there are also real concerns over the safety of the horses after 12 connected to last year's Derby died within just days of the race. NBC's Jesse Kirsch is joining us now from Churchill Downs. Jesse, what's different this year when it comes to monitoring and caring for the horses that are competing in the Derby?
Yeah, and Tom, I just want to emphasize, no horses in the Derby last year died, right? There were horses that were in undercard races that were involved with the facility here in the days and weeks surrounding the Derby and on Derby Day, but not in the Derby itself last year, that died. A total of 12. That led to a suspension of racing here at Churchill Downs at one point as well. And we've asked regulators as well as the track about what changes were made this year. For the track's part, they're saying they're constantly trying to improve. It doesn't take injuries. It doesn't take deaths for them to make changes. They're constantly trying to improve here. Similar story from the regulatory body, HISA, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. And what's interesting about that organization is this year they essentially have their full force on hand because their anti-doping regimen came online in time for this year's Kentucky Derby. So they are at full force with the regulatory oversight nationwide at this point. As for the track, we talked with the chief equine officer, the chief veterinarian officer here at the Churchill Downs racetrack about changes they make here, their incorporation of technology and the like. Here's part of what he shared with us.
We're working with a couple different third-party companies to help develop some risk factor assessment tools. In our industry, we know what many of our risk factors are for horses. We're trying to look outside the box and see if we can use computer-aided technology to help us identify risk factors that traditionally we haven't known about.
He also said they had a piloted sensor program they're now using on all of the Derby horses again, Tom.
Hey, buddy, what's the vibe there right now, given the past that they're trying to work through and correct? But what's the feeling? Is there a feeling of excitement right now?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you can tell, Tom, it just started raining here. They just wrapped up the Kentucky Oaks, which is the big Friday race here, so everyone is clearing out. The rain held off just in time for that race to wrap up. Hopefully the skies will clear tomorrow, but we met some people earlier who were here in the morning excited because it is Derby weekend in Louisville. Tom?
Okay, grab your top hat, Jesse. Thanks very much. Jesse Kirsch, who's right there outside of Louisville. That is a wrap for us at this hour. The coverage resumes on News Now, right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.